Imagine for a moment that the thing you call you is not what it appears to be. What if your identity, the inner narrator you protect and defend, is not a fixed entity but a construction, not a lie but a model? A biological, psychological, and cultural process that generates the feeling that there is a central self inside you controlling everything. If this idea feels uncomfortable, good. Because if you stay with me until the end, the way you understand yourself and your life may never be the same. Let us begin with neuroscience. In the late 1990s, Michael Gazzaniga studied patients who had undergone corpus callosotomy, a surgery that disconnects the two hemispheres of the brain. What he found was extraordinary. When the right hemisphere initiated an action, the left hemisphere, which had not made the decision, instantly created a story to explain it. Gazzaniga called this region the interpreter, a narrative module that fabricates reasons after the body has already acted. This means a part of your mind does not know why you do what you do, but it tells a story so it looks like you are in control. This alone cracks the idea of a unified self. Then there is Benjamin Libet's famous work from the 1980s. Libet discovered that the brain's readiness potential, the electrical buildup that precedes movement, appears hundreds of milliseconds before a person becomes aware of deciding to move. In other words, the brain initiates an action first, and the conscious sense of decision arrives later. More recent studies by Chen Xiongsun and colleagues have shown that brain activity can predict a person's decision up to 7 seconds before they consciously feel they have made it. If choices arise before the self knows them, who is deciding? Now look at Antonio Damasio's research. Damasio describes the self as a dynamic process built from continuously updated maps of the body. The self is not a thing. It is an event, a constant reconstruction of your internal states. It means there is no permanent self living inside your brain. There's only an ongoing process that gives rise to the feeling of identity. This aligns with Thomas Metzinger's self-model theory of subjectivity. Metzinger states plainly, no one has ever been a self. What exists are self-models that the brain generates and then mistakes for reality. You are not the model. You are what perceives the model. Now let us move to philosophy. David Hume wrote in the 18th century that when he looked inside his mind, he never found a self, only a flux of perceptions. He concluded that the self is nothing more than a bundle of experiences. In the 20th century, Alan Watts argued that the ego is not a real entity but a symbol, a linguistic convenience. Jean-Paul Sartre suggested that consciousness does not contain a self behind it. The self emerges from experience. In all these perspectives, the self is not foundational. It is constructed. Ancient spiritual traditions say something remarkably similar. In Buddhism, the doctrine of Unada states that there is no permanent self, not as a negation of existence, but as recognition that what we call the self is composed of changing processes: body, sensations, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. None of these are fixed. The Hindu Vedantic view adds that the true self, the Atman, is not the personality but the underlying awareness that perceives all experiences. Mystical Christianity describes the soul not as memory or identity, but as pure presence. Though these traditions differ in metaphysics, they converge on a single insight. The self as you imagine it is not the final truth. Now bring this back to your own life. Think of how many times you acted on autopilot and then justified the action as if it were a conscious choice. Think of how many patterns you repeated even when you knew they were hurting you. Think of how often you clung to an identity that no longer reflected who you were. If the self were fixed, none of this would happen. But your personality changes, your beliefs change, your memories change. Neuroscience tells us that your brain reshapes itself with each experience. So the self is malleable because it is a process, not an entity. But here comes the deeper question. If the psychological self is a construction, then what is the thing that perceives it? What is this silent awareness that watches your thoughts come and go? Science does not yet know how to explain consciousness. Some researchers, like Roger Penrose, suggest that consciousness may arise from quantum processes in the brain. Others, like Donald Hoffman, propose that what we call reality is merely an interface created by consciousness. Philosophers such as Philip Goff explore panpsychism, the idea that consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe. And while none of these perspectives are final, they all push us toward a larger view. Perhaps the self is not the center of your experience. Perhaps it is a character that consciousness uses to navigate this physical world, a kind of avatar, a point of view, a temporary configuration. You do not need to destroy the self. You only need to see it clearly. When you do, something shifts. Thoughts lose their authority. Emotions become waves instead of storms. Life stops feeling like a threat to your identity and becomes a field of experiences that rise and fall. So pause and reflect. Who are you when you are not thinking about yourself? Who are you when you are fully present? Who are you beneath your beliefs, your memories, your fears, and your roles? When you drop all the stories about who you think you are, what remains? That remainder is not a person. It is awareness. It's presence. It is the open space in which everything appears. If this is true, then your life becomes larger than your identity. You can change without fear. You can respond instead of react. You can see yourself and the world with clarity. And maybe the greatest freedom does not come from strengthening the self, but from loosening your identification with it. Perhaps you are not the author of your story. Perhaps you are the awareness in which the story is happening. The character changes. The awareness does not. And if that is the case, then you have never been as limited as you believed. You have never been as small as the self you were taught to defend. You've always been something larger, something quieter, something indescribably free. You are not the illusion. You are the light that reveals it. If the self is not what you think, then who are you? Welcome to MaEthereal universe. Thanks for watching and see you on our next video.